Did you know there's a logical way to apply shading to your portrait? No more fudging, no more crossing your fingers hoping that it'll work out. No, you didn't know that? Well, stick around. In this video, I will show you 6 tips on how to not get derailed with your portrait drawings when you apply shading. Before we get started, my name is Carolyn Peters and I'm the owner of Kira Studios. That's where I teach classical drawing to artists who need a refresher of the fundamentals so they can reconnect to their creative voice. If that sounds like you, be sure to stick around and hit subscribe so you can get all of my new videos. Now let's get into those 6 shading tips. Tip number 1, in order not to get overwhelmed with your shading, my best tip for you is that you tackle it in layers. Now, if you're thinking like layers like in a cake, let me explain. When we shade, there are 3 main components that go into the shading process. First, we want to build light-shadow separation. After that, we get into transitions and gradations. And the third layer are local values. Rather than trying to juggle all of these 3 elements all at once, it is much easier to tackle them in separate passes. Tip number 2, separate your lights from your shadows with clear patterns. Now, when you're in the beginning phase of applying shading to your portraits, I don't want you to just randomly start by putting smudges here or there. I want you to really begin with understanding the logic behind light. Either light hits the portrait sitter's face directly and creates what's called the light mass, or light does not reach certain parts of the face or gets blocked on certain parts of the face, and those areas are creating the shadow mass. We as artists want to become interested in the shape that the shadow masses create. And again, we do not begin by randomly shading those shapes, but we begin by plotting the edges of those shapes. Now, what makes a good shape pattern? That's an excellent question for you to think about, and I want you to answer it with the idea of a puzzle piece. If the shape is fully enclosed and you would know exactly where to cut it out, then you have a good shape. If you began with its edges, if you just began with some smudges and you don't really know where the edges of that smudge field is, you are not dealing with a clear shadow pattern. Tip number 3, make the edges of that shadow pattern eloquent. Now, what the heck do I mean by that? In essence, we want to translate just with how we treat the edges of that shadow pattern, whether we are dealing with a cast shadow or B, a form shadow. So those are the 2 types of shadow edges that we can deal with, and they both have different types of qualities to them. Form shadows exist because the light rays fail to reach a certain part of the form. Wherever the cheek, nose, or forehead are angling too far away to be reached by the light, so light's coming from the top down, wherever they're too far angled away to be reached by those lights, that's where we have a form shadow edge. And we are interested in the quality of that form shadow edge, which depends on the degree of the plane change. So gradual plane changes like down here at the lower jaw are softer. More abrupt plane changes like here on the eye socket should appear a little bit more firm. The second type of shadow edges that exist are the cast shadow edges. These shadows exist because the light is being blocked by something from reaching what is next to it. So for example, the nose will block the light from reaching the upper lip. So here we have a cast shadow. The brow will block the light from reaching the lower part of the eye socket. So now we have a cast shadow edge here. Or the chin and jaw will block the light from reaching the neck. Cast shadows are crisper the closer they are to the object casting them, and they get fuzzier as they move further away from the object casting them. Put your form shadow edges and your cast shadow edges together and you form a solid, eloquent pattern that will translate the form of the figure for us. And yes, I know there are such things as pitch shadows and reflected lights, but if we pay too much attention to them, they will break open our shadow patterns too much, and like that, our shadow patterns can't do their job effectively. So we want to downplay any of the accents in here, and we want to maintain a nicely uniformed shadow pattern. Tip number 4, learn to deal with the face in terms of facets. Now that we've dealt with the shadows, we need to deal with the variations of light and dark that we can see within the light mass. And the best way to go about that is to learn to see the face in terms of facets. So you can think about the face as a hilly landscape or like little paper strips that are wavy. And because hills and wavy paper strips are a little bit amorphous, imagine that these hills or paper strips are faceted, like creased, where it's very easy to see where one plane ends and the next plane begins. Once you can learn to see the face like this, you can then apply shading according to the logic behind how the light source is relative to these planes. So what do I mean by that? Some planes might be angling very directly at the sunlight. Those will be your brightest planes. And as the planes start to angle slightly away from the light source, they'll get slightly more dark. Now, of course, there will never be as dark as anything in the shadow mass. Now, does drawing your portrait with these facets look good as a finished drawing? No, it looks really awkward and strange, but it's a really important exercise so you get better at noticing and transcribing the different planes of the face. I recommend you begin by getting one of those planar heads and reposition it and draw it from many different angles so you really understand where the facets are. Next step would be to go to a regular model and see if you can break their face into these planar facets. So this is a step towards mastery, it's not the finished product. Now, as a side note, when you begin drawing these planar heads, the first few might look really strange, but don't let that derail you, because having that skill of breaking your face down into planes and facets, it's so useful for when you apply your mid-tone shading, meaning those shadings in the light mass of the face. So do not skip this step if you mean business with your portrait drawing. Now again, when you have your face faceted out and you're ready to apply shading within the light mass, think about this logically. So again, this is how you use these facets when you're actually applying shading. The facets that are angling at the light source most directly will be your brightest planes. So often they don't get any shading, but as the planes start to angle away from the light source, you'll start to apply a little bit of tone. And the more they turn away, the more tone they get. And we call this form modeling. But wait, for all that's good and holy, make sure, as I said earlier, that nothing that is in that light mass gets as dark as anything that's in the shadow mass. Deal? Tip number 5, separate your form modeling or facet work from color. Now that we've dealt with building shadows, modeling form, we have to deal with the third element, which is color, local color, or we also call it local value. What we mean by that is the variation in pigmentation. So for example, certain areas of the body have more sun exposure and are therefore darker. So noses or forearms, those are areas that are more tanned and they have a darker value and therefore need to have a third pass of shading over them to apply that local value. Other areas would be if you have dark hair, or if you have a big face tattoo, that would be local value. Anything where the pigmentation is different is local value, and I tend to deal with that last in the drawing process in a separate phase. See how shading this has nothing to do with the planes of the face, it's just the pigmentation of the hair that's darker. And here too, it's just layering on top of the planes that I've already built. Tip number 6, use your lines strategically. Last but not least, if you're choosing to use shading in your portrait drawing, you want to be aware how lines affect the outcome. Lines have a flattening effect, and often they can work against your best attempts at making something look realistic with your shading. Now, what I recommend is if you're going for a hyper-realistic look, you want to erase out any remnants of line work that you have. And if you do not want to have a hyper-realistic look, but you enjoy playing with the tension between a linear and a tonal drawing, you can use line work, but you want to make sure that it's only in those places where you really want them, so they're not just unintentionally left behind. Whew. Well, that was a lot. Now let's review. The 6 tips are as follows. Number 1, work in passes, work in layers. Number 2, begin with a very clear separation between light and shadow patterns. Number 3, when you have your shadow pattern, make sure you are very eloquent about the quality of the shadow pattern edges. Number 4, when you are done with your shadows, address what's happening within the lights by modeling the midtones, modeling the variations within the light, and you can best do that by thinking about the face in terms of facets and planes. Number 5, address local value or local color shifts in a separate pass altogether. And number 6, use line work intentionally if at all. Now, I hope these tips will help you stay organized the next time you shade your portrait drawing. If you would like to see an image step-by-step guide of the portrait drawing process, look in the description box below. Look for how to get on my insiders email list. And when you sign up for this email list, you get a free guide. It looks like this over here, and hopefully it will help you even more. Now, before you head out and draw, I would love to hear in the comments below which one of these tips is your favorite. Which one are you going to try out? I'm really curious to find out, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video too.